Mom, give me your credit card. Or else, she said, when I said no, she threw the hot coffee in my face. Child, you attacked the wrong mother. 73 years old, and I never thought I'd see the day when my own daughter would look me in the eye and threaten me in my own kitchen. But there was Denise standing 2 feet away from me with that cold look in her eyes. I've been seeing more and more lately, the look that said she was entitled to everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, for everything I had saved. And when I said no to her demand, she picked up that steaming hot coffee mug and threw it right in my face. Child, let me tell you something about attacking the woman who raised you, who worked 3 jobs to put you through college, who went without so you could have better fortune. It started 6 months earlier when Denise first began coming around with her hand out different excuses every time. But always the same request. Mom, I need money. The kids need this. The kids need that. The house payment is due. The car broke down. Sarah's dance classes, Jake's football equipment, always something, always urgent, always my responsibility to fix. Even though she was 38 years old with a college degree, I paid for and a job that paid more than I ever made in my life. That particular morning in October, when everything changed, Denise had called me at 7 a.m. Mom, I'm coming over. We need to talk about something important. I was already up making my coffee and oatmeal like I did every morning since James died 5 years ago. Routine was what kept me going. Routine and the knowledge that I had raised good children who would take care of themselves. But sitting there in my kitchen waiting for Denise to arrive, I was starting to wonder if I had been fooling myself when she walked through my front door without knocking, like she always did. Now I could see the determination in her face. This wasn't going to be another sob story about unexpected expenses. This was going to be different, and not in a good way. She sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where I used to help her with homework, where she used to tell me about her day, where she used to ask my advice about everything from boys to career choices. But those days were long gone. Now she saw me as an ATM, but not a mother.
Mom, she said, without any small talk or pleasantries, I need access to your emergency credit card. The gold one with the high limit.
I looked at her over my coffee cup. That card had been Jameis' idea before he died. He wanted me to have something for real emergencies, medical bills, home repairs, catastrophes, not dance classes and football equipment. Honey, I said calmly, that card is for genuine emergencies. You know that? This is a genuine emergency. She snapped back. Jake got accepted to that private academy, and Sarah needs those SAT prep classes. If we don't move fast, they'll miss their opportunity. I set down my coffee cup and really looked at my daughter. When had she become this person? When had she started believing that her wants were my obligations? When had she forgotten that I was her mother, not her personal bank? Denise, those are wonderful opportunities, but they're not emergencies. They're choices, and they're your choices to make with your money, not mine. Her face changed, then from pleading to something harder. Something entitled, Mom, you don't understand how competitive things are, now how expensive everything is. You lived in a different time when things were simpler. Simpler. I almost laughed at that. Working 3 jobs as a single black woman in the 70s and 80s while she was growing up. Nothing about that was simple. Going without lunch so she could have name brand shoes wasn't simple. Working double shifts at the hospital while going to nursing school at night wasn't simple. Denise, I said, keeping my voice steady, I understand more than you think about sacrifice, about working for what you want, about making hard choices. I did it for you for 20 years. She rolled her eyes, Mom, that was different. You had to do those things. You didn't have choices like I do now. I want better for my kids than what we had. What we had. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What we had was love and respect and family values. What we had was a mother who would do anything for her child. What we had was enough, but apparently it wasn't good enough for her. Now, I stood up from the table. Denise, I think you should leave and think about what you're asking me to do. Think about whether this is really an emergency or whether you're asking me to fund a lifestyle you can afford. That's when she stood up to her chair, scraping against the floor. Mom, I'm not leaving until you give me that card information. Jake and Sarah deserve the best, and you're being selfish by hoarding money. You don't even use hoarding money. That word hit me like a physical blow. The money James and I had saved penny by penny, working ourselves to exhaustion, planning for our retirement, planning for emergencies, planning for the future. She called that hoarding. Denise, I said, my voice getting firmer, you need to leave my house right now. No, she said, crossing her arms. I'm not leaving without that card information. And if you don't give it to me willingly, I'll find another way to get it. Another way. I stared at her. What did that mean? Was she threatening me? Was my own daughter actually threatening me in my own home? Mom, she said, her voice taking on that sweet tone she used when she wanted something. Just think about it logically. You're 73 years old. What are you saving that money for? You could die tomorrow, and then what good would it do? Anybody, at least. If you give it to me now, you can see your grandchildren benefit from it. There it was, the real truth. She wasn't asking for help. She was demanding her inheritance while I was still alive. She had already decided that my money was her money, and I was just being stubborn by not handing it over. I walked to the front door and opened it. Denise, you have 10 seconds to get out of my house before I call the police. She laughed, actually laughed. Mom, you're not going to call the police on your own daughter over money. Don't be ridiculous. Watch me, I said, reaching for my phone. Wait, she said, holding up her hands. Okay, I'll leave. But Mom, you need to think about this. Seriously, the kids are counting on you being their grandmother means helping them succeed. Being their grandmother, I repeated, means loving them unconditionally, teaching them values, showing them respect. It doesn't mean being their personal ATM. She shook her head like I was the one being unreasonable. Mom, you just don't get it, do you? This is how families work. Now, people help each other. They invest in each other. You can't just sit on a pile of money while your grandchildren miss out on opportunities. I looked at this woman who looked like my daughter, who sounded like my daughter, but who had somehow become a stranger. And I said, Denise, if you ever speak to me like this again, if you ever come to my house demanding money instead of asking, if you ever forget that I'm your mother and not your bank account, you will not be welcome here anymore. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she said, fine, Mom, be that way. But don't blame me. When Jake and Sarah asked why their grandmother didn't care enough to help them succeed, that hurt more than anything else she could have said, because she knew it would, because she knew I would do anything for those children, and she was using that love as a weapon against me. After she left, I sat back down at my kitchen table and tried to understand what had just happened. When had my relationship with my daughter become so transactional? When had she stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a resource? When had I become nothing more than an obstacle between her and what she thought she deserved? The next few weeks were quiet. Denise didn't call, didn't visit, didn't bring the kids by for their usual weekend stays. I missed Jake and Sarah terribly, but I also felt a strange sense of peace, not having to wonder what the real reason was behind every phone call, not having to brace myself for the next financial emergency, not having to feel guilty for setting boundaries. Then one morning in November, she showed up again, but this time was different. This time she walked into my kitchen like she owned it, like she had every right to be there, like the conversation we had weeks earlier had never happened. Mom, she said, sitting down at my table like nothing had changed. I've been thinking about our talk, and I realized I may have come across as demanding when I was just trying to look out for the kids. I poured myself a cup of coffee and didn't offer her any. I've been thinking about it too, Denise, and I realize you may have forgotten that I'm your mother, not your employee. She laughed, that fake laugh she used when she was trying to manipulate me. Mom, don't be dramatic. Nobody said you were an employee, but you are a grandmother, and grandmothers help their grandchildren. Help, I said, sitting down across from her. Help means babysitting when you need it. Help means being there for school plays and soccer games. Help means giving advice and showing love. Help does not mean funding your lifestyle choices. Oh, please, Mom, she said, rolling her eyes. It's not about lifestyle choices. It's about giving the kids the best possible start in life. Don't you want them to succeed? Of course I want them to succeed, but success isn't bought, Denise. It's earned through hard work and determination and learning to live within your means. Three things you apparently never learned. That seemed to hit a nerve because her whole demeanor changed. The fake sweetness disappeared, and what was left was cold and calculating. Mom, she said, leaning forward, you need to understand something. I'm not asking anymore. I'm telling you, I need that credit card information, and you're going to give it to me. Excuse me, I said, barely believing what I was hearing. You heard me, she said, her voice getting harder. You're an old woman living alone with more money than you could spend in 3 lifetimes. Meanwhile, your grandchildren are being held back because you're too selfish to share what you don't even need. Selfish. The word echoed in my head like a slap. I had worked my entire life to provide for my family. I had sacrificed everything for my daughter and her future, and now she was calling me selfish for not giving her access to my life saving. Denise, I said, standing up slowly, you need to leave right now. No, she said, also standing up. I'm not leaving until you give me what I came for, Mom. Those kids are your legacy. If you don't invest in them now, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Invest in them, I repeated, or invest in your idea of what their lives should look like. Same thing, she snapped. No, I said firmly, it's not the same thing at all. Investing in children means teaching them values, giving them love, showing them how to work for what they want, not handing them everything on a silver platter because their mother thinks she deserves it. Their mother deserves it. She said, her voice rising, I am your daughter. I gave you grandchildren. I am the reason you have any family at all. And you owe me. Owe you. I felt my blood pressure rising. Owe you for what? For being born, for growing up, for having children. Denise, nobody owes you anything in this life. Everything worth having must be earned. That's bullshit, Mom. And you knew it. She said, her language getting coarser. You have money sitting in accounts earning interest while we struggle to give the kids opportunities. You could change their lives tomorrow, but you're too stubborn and too selfish to do it. Stubborn and selfish. I looked at this woman who was supposed to be my daughter and wondered where I had gone wrong in raising her. How had she learned to see taking as her right and giving as other people's obligation? Denise, I said, my voice deadly calm. You have 30 seconds to get out of my house, or I am calling the police. She laughed again, but this time there was nothing fake about it. It was bitter and mean. Mom, you think I'm scared of your threats. You think I'm going to back down like some scared little girl. Well, I'm not that little girl anymore, and I'm not leaving without what I came for. What you came for. I repeated, you came here to steal from me, to take money that doesn't belong to you, to demand something you have no right to. She picked up my coffee mug, the one James had given me for our 40th anniversary, the one with our wedding picture on it, and for a moment I thought she was going to drink from it, but instead she held it like a weapon. Mom, she said, her voice low and dangerous, give me that credit card information now. No, I said, backing away from her. Wrong answer, she said, and that's when she threw the hot coffee right in my face. The pain was immediate, and searing coffee, hot enough to burn skin, splashed across my cheek, down my neck, soaking into my blouse. The shock of it made me gasp and close my eyes instinctively. But even through the pain, even through the disbelief, what hit me hardest was the realization that my own daughter had just physically attacked me. When I opened my eyes, she was standing there, holding the empty mug, looking, not shocked, not horrified by what she had just done, but satisfied, like she had finally gotten my attention. Now, she said calmly, do you understand how serious I am about this, Mom? I am not playing games. I am not making requests. I need that money, and I will do whatever it takes to get it. I reached for a dish towel with shaking hands and began wiping the coffee from my face. The liquid was still hot enough to sting, and I could already feel my skin starting to redden where it had hit me, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional devastation of realizing that my own child had just assaulted me. Denise, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, you just threw hot coffee in my face. And it'll do worse if you don't give me what I want, she replied without any trace of remorse. Worse, I stared at her in complete disbelief. Worse than burning your own mother. Worse than attacking the woman who raised you, who sacrificed everything for you, who loved you unconditionally for 38 years. Mom, she said, sitting back down like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just committed assault in my own kitchen, like we were having a normal conversation about the weather. You made me do that. If you had just been reasonable from the beginning, none of this would have been necessary. I made you do that. I repeated the words slowly, trying to process what I was hearing. I made you throw hot coffee in my face. You forced my hand, she said with a shrug. You were being stubborn and selfish, and you left me no choice but to show you how serious I am about this. No choice. I felt something cold and hard settling in my chest, replacing the shock and pain, something that had been building for months as I watched my daughter become someone I didn't recognize, someone entitled and demanding and cruel. Denise, I said, setting down the coffee-stained towel, you have made the biggest mistake of your life. She rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh, please, Mom. What are you going to do? Call the police. Tell them your daughter threw coffee at you. They'll laugh you out of the station.
Maybe they will. I said, walking slowly to my purse, but we'll find out together, won't we?
Wait, she said, and for the first time since she had walked into my house that morning, I heard uncertainty in her voice. Mom, you wouldn't really call the police on your own daughter, would you? I pulled out my phone and looked at her. This woman who shared my DNA, who had grown in my body, who had been the center of my world for so many years, but who had just shown me exactly what she was capable of when she didn't get her way. Denise, I said, dialing 911. You just physically assaulted me in my own home after demanding money that doesn't belong to you. If that doesn't warrant a police call, then what does? She jumped up from her chair, panic finally replacing the cold calculation in her eyes. Mom, wait, please don't do this. Think about the kids. Think about what this will do to them. Now you want me to think about the kids, I said as the phone began to ring. Now, after you just threw hot coffee in my face, you want me to consider how my actions might affect them. 911, what's your emergency? The voice on the other end was calm and professional. I need to report a domestic assault, I said, my eyes never leaving Denise's face. My daughter just threw hot coffee at me and threatened to do worse if I don't give her access to my credit cards. Denise grabbed for the phone, but I stepped back out of her reach. Ma'am, are you injured? The operator asked. Yes, I said, touching my still stinging cheek. My face and neck are burned. And she threatened further violence. If I don't comply with her demands. Denise was frantically shaking her head, mouthing the word no. But I was done being intimidated by my own child, done being threatened and manipulated and abused. Ma'am, help is on the way. The operator said, please stay on the line and try to stay safe. I'm staying on the line. I said, but I'm not the one who needs to worry about safety. She attacked me, and now she's going to face the consequence of. Mom, please, Denise was begging, now tears streaming down her face. I didn't mean it. I was just frustrated. Please don't do this to me. You didn't mean to throw hot coffee in my face, I asked. Or you didn't mean to get caught. Both. She sobbed. Please, Mom. I was just desperate. The kids need so much, and you have so much. Please just hang up the phone. We'll work this out between us. Work it out. I repeated, like we worked out your demand for my credit cards, like we worked out your threat to take the money by force. Denise, there is no working this out. You just showed me exactly who you are and what you're capable of. The police arrived within 10 minutes. Two officers, one older white man who looked like he had seen everything, and one younger black woman who reminded me of myself at her age, determined and serious and professional. Ma'am, one of them said to me, are you the homeowner who called about a domestic assault? Yes, I said I am Ruby Washington. This is my house and this is my daughter Denise, who just threw hot coffee at me when I refused to give her my credit card information. The older officer looked at Denise, who was still crying, and asked, ma'am, is this accurate? It was an accident, she said through her tears. I didn't mean to hurt her. We were just having an argument about money, and things got heated. An argument, I said, looking at the officers, or extortion. She demanded money that doesn't belong to her, threatened me when I said no, and then physically attacked me when I still refused. The younger officer was taking notes while the older one examined my face and neck, which were still red from the coffee. Ma'am, he said to me, do you want to press charges? I looked at Denise, who was staring at me with a mixture of hope and terror, clearly believing that maternal love would override justice, that my desire to protect her would be stronger than my need to protect myself. Yes, I said clearly, I want to press charges. Mom, no, Denise screamed. Please don't do this to me. It'll lose my job. The kids will be embarrassed. Please, it'll pay you back. It'll make this right. Make it right. I said, how exactly do you make assault right? How do you make threatening your own mother right? Denise, you made a choice today, and now you have to live with the consequences. The officers arrested her right there in my kitchen, reading her rights, while she sobbed and begged and promised to change to be better, to never ask for money again. But it was too late for promises, too late for regret, too late for anything except justice. After they took her away, I sat alone in my kitchen with a bag of frozen peas against my face, thinking about the little girl who used to climb into my lap when she had nightmares, who used to make me cards for Mother's Day, who used to tell me I was the best mama in the whole world, and wondering how that little girl had become a woman who would burn my face for money. The next few days were quiet. The house felt empty without the possibility of Denise's visits, but it also felt peaceful for the first time in months. I didn't have to wonder when the next demand would come, didn't have to brace myself for another financial emergency, didn't have to feel guilty for having boundaries. Denise called from jail crying and apologizing and begging me to drop the charges, but I had made my decision. Some lines once crossed cannot be uncrossed. Some acts once committed cannot be undone, and physical assault was one of them. A week later, her husband Michael called me for the first time since the arrest. Mrs. Washington, he said, his voice strained. I know things are complicated right now, but the kids are asking about you. They don't understand why Denise is gone or why you haven't come to see them. I felt my heart break a little because I loved those children more than life itself. But I also knew that protecting myself was the first step in being able to protect them. Michael, I said gently, the children are welcome to visit me anytime they want, but they cannot be used as weapons in this situation. Denise made her choice, and now we all have to live with it. What if she gets help? He asked. What if she goes to counseling and anger management? Would you consider dropping the charges then? Michael, she threw hot coffee in my face and threatened to do worse if I didn't give her money. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was assault and extortion. But she's the mother of your grandchildren. He pressed, surely that's worth something. Being a mother is worth everything, I said, which is why what she did is so unforgivable. Mothers protect their children. They don't assault their own mothers for money. The trial was set for 3 months later, and in the time leading up to it, Denise tried everything to get me to change my mind. She wrote letters full of apologies and promises. She had Michael bring the children by to tug at my heartstrings. She even had her pastor call me to talk about forgiveness and Christian charity. But forgiveness and justice are not mutually exclusive. I could forgive my daughter for what she had done while still holding her accountable for her actions. And accountability meant facing the legal consequences of assault. The day of the trial, I sat in the courtroom wearing my best navy blue dress, the one I wore to church every Sunday and watched as Denise was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit that made her look smaller and younger than her 38 years. When the prosecutor asked me to tell the court what had happened, I spoke clearly and calmly about the months of financial demands, about the escalating threats, about the coffee thrown in my face, about the promise of worse to come. When Denise's public defender asked me during cross-examination if I really wanted to see my own daughter go to prison, I looked at Denise, who was crying silently at the defense table, and said, I want to see my daughter learn that actions have consequences, that assault is a crime, regardless of who commits it, and that being family does not give you the right to hurt people when you don't get your way. The judge sentenced Denise to 6 months in jail, with the possibility of early release for good behavior and mandatory anger management counseling. After the sentencing, Denise was led away without looking at me, but her husband Michael approached me in the hallway. Mrs. Washington, he said, I don't understand how you could do this to your own daughter. I looked at this man who had married my child, who had fathered my grandchildren, who apparently thought that family relationships should be above the law. Michael, I said I didn't do anything to Denise. She did this to herself when she chose violence over conversation, when she chose demands over requests, when she chose to see me as an ATM instead of her mother. But the kids I interrupted will learn that their grandmother stands up for herself, that assault is wrong, regardless of who commits it, and that family love does not mean accepting abuse. During Denise's incarceration, I continued my relationship with Jake and Sarah through supervised visits at their other grandparents' house. It wasn't ideal, but it allowed me to maintain my bond with them while also maintaining my boundaries. The children asked questions, of course. Why was mommy gone? Why couldn't they visit Grandma Ruby at her house? Why did everyone seem so sad and angry? I answered their questions honestly, but in age-appropriate ways. Mommy made some bad choices. I told them, and now she has to learn from those choices. But that doesn't change how much I love you or how much she loves you. When Denise was released after serving 4 months, she looked different, thinner, quieter, more thoughtful. And when she called to ask if she could come see me, I agreed, but on my terms. She arrived at my house on a Tuesday afternoon wearing a simple blue dress and carrying a letter in her hand. Mom, she said, standing on my front porch, I wrote you something while I was away, and I was hoping you would let me read it to you. I invited her in, and we sat at the same kitchen table where everything had started, where she had demanded my credit cards, where she had thrown coffee in my face, where she had threatened to do worse. Mom, the letter began. I know that saying I'm sorry isn't enough for what I did to you. I know that explaining my desperation and my frustration doesn't excuse my actions, and I know that asking for forgiveness is asking for something I may not deserve. She paused, looking up at me with tears in her eyes before continuing. But I want you to know that every day I was away, I thought about that morning in your kitchen, and I tried to understand how I became the kind of person who would hurt her own mother for money. The counseling helped me see that somewhere along the way, I started believing that wanting something for my children was the same as deserving it, that needing money was the same as being entitled to it, and that being your daughter gave me rights instead of responsibility. I listened without interrupting as she continued reading. I realized now that I wasn't protecting my children by demanding money from you. I was teaching them that family members exist to be used, that love is conditional on getting what you want, and that violence is acceptable when people don't do what you demand. She looked up again, tears flowing freely. Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me right away, and I don't expect you to trust me again immediately, but I want you to know that I understand now what I did wrong, and I want to spend the rest of my life making sure I never become that person again. I reached across the table and took her hand the way I had done when she was small and scared and looking for comfort. Denise, I said, you are my daughter and I love you, but love and trust are different things. Love is unconditional, but trust must be earned, and you have a lot of work to do to earn mine back. She nodded, squeezing my hand. I know, Mom, and am ready to do that work. Am ready to show you through my actions, not just my words, that am the daughter you raised me to be. Over the following months, Denise proved her commitment to change. She got a second job to pay her legal fees without asking me for help. She attended anger management classes voluntarily, even after her court-mandated sessions were complete. She started therapy to address the entitlement issues that had led to her assault. Most importantly, she changed how she interacted with me and with her children. She stopped making demands and started making requests. She stopped assuming and started asking. She stopped taking and started giving. When Christmas came that year, we celebrated together for the first time since her arrest. It wasn't the same as before. How could it be? But it was real in a way. Our relationship hadn't been for years. Sitting around my tree watching Jake and Sarah open presents, I thought about the journey we had all been on, the pain and the healing, the consequences and the growth, the breakdown and the rebuilding. Denise caught me watching her and smiled. "Mom," she said quietly, "thank you for what I asked, for not giving up on me." She said, "For holding me accountable, for showing me that love means setting boundaries, and for teaching me that family means treating each other with respect." I smiled back at my daughter, this woman who had hurt me so deeply, but who had also found her way back to being the person I had raised her to be. That's what mothers do. I said we love our children enough to let them face consequences. We love them enough to say no when they need to hear it, and we love them enough to welcome them back when they truly change. 2 years later, Denise surprised me with a gift on Mother's Day. It was a framed photo of the two of us, from when she was 5 years old, sitting on my lap, reading a book together, both of us smiling at the camera. On the back, she had written to the mother who loved me enough to hold me accountable, who showed me that respect is not optional, and who taught me that family means never giving up on each other, even when things get hard. I hung that picture in my kitchen where I could see it every morning when I made my coffee, where it would remind me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their worst behavior, and that family love strong enough to survive assault and imprisonment and consequence is love worth fighting for. Sitting in my kitchen now, 3 years after that terrible morning when my daughter threw coffee in my face, I can say with certainty that I made the right choice in pressing charges and holding her accountable, in refusing to let family love excuse criminal behavior. Denise learned that actions have consequences, that assault is a crime, regardless of motivation, and that family relationships require mutual respect to survive. The children learn that their grandmother stands up for herself, that love does not mean accepting abuse, and that sometimes the people who love you most are the ones who hold you accountable for your actions. And I learned that quiet doesn't mean weak, that setting boundaries with family is not only acceptable, but necessary. And that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be anyone's victim, even when that someone is your own child. The coffee stain is long gone from my kitchen floor, but the lesson remains written in our family history, clear as day. Love without respect is not love at all. And family is not an excuse for abuse, but a reason to demand better from each other.